I think the figures actually were, for the Eurozone as a whole, broadly what we expected. But what's really interesting is if you look at the likes of France and Spain, who have had more severe lockdowns than other parts of Europe, you can just look at the Google mobility indices for a good indication of this. They've performed a little bit weaker. Their growth fell more. But this is clearly just a start. Don't forget, these lockdowns were only in at the end of the first quarter. So the second quarter numbers are going to be just as bad. Such is the scale of the crisis we're seeing at the moment. The recovery is going to be very slow. We at ING, we don't expect the likes of the Eurozone or the US or the UK economies to regain the size of where they were before the virus until, say, 2022 or later. It's going to take a lot of time to pick up the pieces. The government measures that have been taken, the likes of the short-time work schemes, the job retention scheme, as it's called in the UK, that will help. But with firms shut down, whatever the governments do, there are going to be firms that unfortunately slip through the safety net. And as I say, that means it's going to take a while to recover. One of the best leading indicators we've had of just how bad this situation is the US jobless claims numbers. And we're going to get these figures again today. And they're likely to show that 30 million people have been claiming unemployment benefits since the crisis began. And that's much quicker than we've seen in any real previous crisis, including the Great Recession. And in fact, if you want to look at what the last big fall in jobs was in the US, you have to look back to the end of World War II, the demilitarization, and even then it was only 200 million jobs lost. We're now looking at 30 million. So that just gives you a sense of the scale. But this isn't an ordinary recession. Of course, there will be an element of the economy that can just switch back on again. So there will be an element of a V-shaped recovery. But by and large, as I mentioned earlier, that overall thing is going to take a lot longer to come back. This isn't a conventional recession. By necessity, a number of economies have just shut down, and that, at the end of the day, GDP is just an accounting measure reflecting that. So we're going to see similar declines in the likes of the UK. We've already had the US numbers earlier in the week. As I mentioned, the second quarter could look even worse. Some governments are talking about even perhaps 20 to 30% falls in GDP. We're not quite there yet at ING, but clearly the impact is going to be a much heavier, and it's going to be across the board.